Welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to show you how to sculpt a dragon mug. This is the year of the dragon, beginning February 10th. I love dragons and how they're woven into cultures worldwide. I begin each piece by carving a mandala into the bottom. It's kind of my signature. Whether you hand build your mug or throw it on the wheel, that's up to you. This was thrown on the wheel. I'm carving the pattern that represents scales and rock formations. There are many ways to approach sculpture. There are a few things to keep in mind when creating ceramic sculptures. It's easiest to create general shapes by starting with a ball of clay. From there, you're able to create other shapes. I'm shaping the dragon's head and getting the general look that I'm going for. I'm blocking out the shapes and making the dragon's facial structure by forming it with my hands. I'm draping the coil over the mug to figure out how I want the dragon to appear. Once I have an idea where it is, I begin scoring exactly where the dragon will be attached. There are different scoring tools you can use that are more effective than this loop tool, but this will work for now. I then brush on the slip that serves as a glue to connect the pieces together, and I'm using pressure to fuse the two pieces together. It's important to be consistent throughout the whole attachment process. I'm going along the edges to ensure that the coils attach properly, and it's important that the mug is not too dry so that the consistency of the clays can merge together. Wherever you've attached a portion of clay, it's important to go along and smear the edge into the piece that you're attaching it to. This creates a bind that will prevent the parts from separating. Once it's been attached, I can carve more detail into the overall shape of the dragon's head, and I'm using a loop tool to sketch out the general appearance. In placing the eyes to use as a reference for the rest of the facial features, I'm using a flat tool that kind of already has an eye shape. Loop tools are great to carve small lines like the details when sculpting an eye. And I'm adding clay to build up the cheekbone, and using a ballpoint tool to create nostrils. I'll link these tools below in the description if you want to check out some of my favorite sculpting tools. When blocking out a general shape like a head, it's really important to look at the sculpture from all angles to ensure that the shapes are symmetrical. I'm adding little bits of clay to build up the facial structure. With the small loop tool, I'm adding more detail to the eyes and creating expression and a little bit of character. Starting with the slab, I'm beginning to sculpt the wings. By cutting out a broad shape of the wing, I can get an idea of the overall appearance. I line them up so that they're symmetrical, and I eyeball a general shape that I form into a wing. Here I'm creating guidelines where the skeletal structure would be, and seeing how I want the wings to wrap around the mug. I'm kind of basing the wing structure off of a bat wing, so I'm carving the arches of the wing membrane using a needle tool. That way I can cut clean lines. I'm lining them up so that they're the same before I carve detail into them. And I'm using a loop tool to cut the surface of the clay to accentuate the bone structure of the wing, carving the guidelines to sculpt and carving some clay away. I'm forming the wing to the pot where I want it to lay. I'm going for a natural movement around the mug. I go along and smooth out the edge and emphasize the little points. And modeling the clay by pinching and smoothing it into the desired shape that I'm going for. I'm ready to attach the wing. I'm applying slip and massage the clay to conform to the mug. By pressing and smearing the clay, I'm attaching the wing to the dragon's body. And adjusting the wing for a more natural look. I'm applying the other wing and repeating the same process. By sculpting the detail of the underwing, I'm controlling the overall appearance. And using my fingers to shape the top of the wing and smooth out the surface, I'm then ready to attach the wing and begin sculpting some of the shoulder and back musculature. It's super helpful to study the anatomy of other animals to get a foundation to understand the musculature and bone structure. I'm adding biceps by applying little bits of clay and smoothing them into the wing. Loop tools are essential for some of these sculpting processes to attach and create textures. I'm adding horns to the dragon's head, first getting the positioning right. I line them both up, sponging the surface and pressing them into the clay body. I'm able to secure them and go in with my sculpture tool to smear the clay and bind it. I'm adding smaller horns with little balls of clay all over the dragon's head. I think dragons look so cute with lots of little horns, and I'm attaching them with a small loop tool to shape and connect them. Starting with a coil and cutting into sections, I'm rolling the clay into little balls and creating scales along the spine. With the body damp, the balls of clay stick really easy. Again, I'm binding the clay to the body by pressing and smoothing it with the loop tool, as you can see here. I'm adding tricep muscles to give an active appearance. By adding small pieces of clay, I can control how I build up the musculature. And now for the fun part. I'm using a ballpoint tool to carve the scale patterns onto the face. This is a great tool to essentially draw onto the clay. With scales, I find that drawing them individually, I'm able to customize each scale and create a textural look that's more natural. And I'm brushing the little bits of clay away. The horns need some love, so I'm going in with a wire tool to carve a natural horn texture and ridges. Carving is easiest once the clay is dried a little past leather hard. When creating this kind of superficial texture, it's important that the clay isn't too wet, or the little scraps of clay will stick and create unwanted imperfections. When the clay is dry enough, it's easy to brush away. With the scale texture, the scales are all different, but are following a definite pattern. Like patterns found in nature, there is a geometry with variations. The fun thing with sculpting fantasy creatures, you can create unique details that are not set to one biological standard, and there's room for the imagination and ability to contribute to the collective imagination. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, and leave a comment about this video or what kind of videos you'd like to see me make. Thank you so much, and tune in next time.